Many, if not most of you, either know Stephen as one of our finest birders or have seen many of his reports and exceptional bird photos over recent years, often taken at Blue Mash. I believe a pair of rose-breasted grosbeaks in the air, right? He's known for capturing songbirds in the air, and one day he's going to show us all how to do it. Probably like me, you've always pronounced his name as Stephen Davies, when the correct Welsh pronunciation of his name is actually Davis, a common native Wales. This was pointed out to me by past President Anna Ursiolo. Where's Anna? Thank you, Anna. Who won tonight. Thanks, Anna. As I said, though, as Stephen confirmed, after 31 years of living in the U.S., I've heard it pronounced all different ways and mentally desensitized. Having previewed Stephen's PowerPoint talk, I know that he has many superb slides to show us tonight and would like to get started, so I'll conclude by reading his eBird bio. He told me at dinner tonight, this is fine. These are his words. Welshman exiled to America since 1993. First began making notes about birds when I was seeing in 1982. In the U.S., I attended graduate school at Cornell, where I occasionally led field trips for the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. I then lived for 6 years in San Francisco, where I birded around California, elsewhere in the Western U.S., and began venturing south to Mexico and beyond. Ran occasional shorebird identification workshops for Golden Gate Bird, resident of the Washington, D.C. area since 2004. Finally, in his iNaturalist profile, mentions that he has, quote, been interested in all things nature for as long as I can remember, unquote. So please welcome Stephen Davis.
Say thank you very much for that kind introduction. That was lovely, and thank you for the kind invitation to come speak here too. This is great, and thank you all of you for coming out this evening. You all, the folks online too, for tuning in. I do hope that the audio holds up for you okay. And oh, Mark's gonna blow my first joke, but there we go. I'll start with a little disclaimer as well, if it's okay. So all the photography that I'll show you is all mine. I didn't steal anything off the internet or anything. Well, there's a couple of Google Maps that I did swipe, but it's obvious what those are. So, but all the photography is mine, and I just want to put it out there that I mean I'm a birder. I'm not. I take photos to. No, it's true. I things. I take photos so that I can study them afterwards. I feel like I learn a lot from looking at photos after the fact, and I have neither the artistic vision nor the patience really to produce art. So bear with me, please, with the photography at least. Okay, so the book is going to be about safaris in Southern Africa. And when I first heard about this idea, I was talking to somebody else who'd actually done this kind of trip, and I think my response is probably similar to what you are all thinking now. It's like, what? You did what? And then the next obvious questions that come to mind is like, is that a good idea? I mean, is it even safe to do that? And what I plan to do this evening is I'll basically relate to you our experiences and, start off with a little bit of logistics of how these trips work. And then I'll move on. I'll give you just a very quick fly through of some of the variety of bird species that on a trip like this, and you can make your minds up for yourselves as to whether you think it's a good idea. So first off, so where do you go to do a self-drive safari, right? Africa is vast, and some places that are just under consideration because it's not a sensible prospect to go there because of conflict, political unrest, and so on. So where can you go that is sort of relatively safe for an independent traveler to go, but also has amazing natural resources and good bird? Choice, of course, would be South Africa, and maybe some of you have been there. South Africa is an incredible country with incredible landscapes. I've only very short amount of time there, and it's definitely a country that I would like to get back to. Lots that I haven't seen. This sort of trip, we were actually looking for a little more sort of a wilderness type experience, because South Africa is really quite a well-developed country. And so we began researching, visiting Namibia and Botswana. So these are both and very sparsely populated. In fact, Namibia is one of the most sparsely populated countries in the world, but they are, relatively safe to visit, and they have amazing natural resources. Fauna that you sort of associate with African safaris, they're all, it's able to see all of that stuff in Namibia and Botswana. And they have amazing national parks and game refuges and stuff like that that are welcoming to independent travelers. So this seemed like an ideal destination to start this kind of trip. So we've largely focused our attention in the northern part of Namibia and Botswana. And as you can see from the satellite imagery, this is actually a very dry part of the world. In fact, south of the Sahara Desert, areas of Africa, much of western Namibia is occupied by the Namib Desert, which is one of the driest on Earth. And in a dry landscape like this, wildlife and of course birds will congregate wherever there's water. And there's some important sources of water across northern Namibia and Botswana. So in Namibia, there's the Etosha Pan, which is a huge 75 miles long, a temporary lake that is occasionally filled with water that flows in through southwards from Angola. Then further east, there's the Cubango River, which also runs in Angola, that runs south, actually forms the border between Namibia and Angola for part of its length, before eventually turning south into Botswana, where it empties into the Okavango Delta. So that's what you can see. The pointer work? Oh, it does. So there's the Okavango Delta, and this is one of the world's biggest freshwater wetlands. Globally important stuff for many wildlife species. There are other rivers. The Kwondo River, again, originates in Angola, south into the Linyanti and Chobe rivers that form the northern border of Botswana. Flow into the Zambezi right around Gula border crossing between Botswana and Zambia. So these are all globally important sites. Fortunately, there's a fantastic network of national parks that protect these areas. There's Etosha National Park that's centered on the Etosha Pan. There's the Moremi Game Reserve in the Okavango Delta, and then there's the Chobe National Park on the floodplains of the Chobe River. And so these are the areas that we focused on our visits, as well as which also has some fantastic birds. Okay, so what do you need to explore these areas? Well, in Namibia, there are very few roads, and what roads? But a lot of the driving is on dirt roads like this that are mostly made of fairly hard packed. And so four-wheel drive and decent clearance are definitely necessary in order to feel a safe and comfortable ride. But you're not really in that much danger of getting stuck, and unless you do something silly. And so for that kind of driving, a vehicle like this is perfectly adequate. This is a Toyota Hilux. It's sort of a mid-sized pickup truck, like the African equivalent of a Toyota Tacoma that you would buy in this country. It's a little more sort of off-road folk clearance and very capable full drive, certainly more than adequate for driving around Namibia. Botswana are virtually no roads at all. Most of the driving is on these very tough sandy tracks through the bush that are just very deep, very soft sand. And there's a very real danger of getting stuck on these tracks. And so much more serious off-road build. And this is the vehicle that we took around most of Botswana. This is a Toyota Land Cruiser, but unlike any Land Cruiser you will buy in the United States, this is a very sort of off-road specialized vehicle, commonplace in Africa. If you've been there, these vehicles are all over the place, but you can see it has serious ground clearance, very powerful four-wheel drive. It has a snorkel, a shovel up the top there, a winch in the front, some serious skid plates, and all of which were necessary and all we used on our drive. Had two gas tanks, two completely independent 90-liter gas tanks that you filled through separate filler ports, which together with an extra 10-liter jerry can on the back give you a fuel carrying capacity of 200 liters, which is overflow. And even with that, you still have to be extremely careful with your fuel logistics because gas stations are so far apart, many hundreds of miles apart. But I will say that this was a fantastic vehicle. I mean, it clawed its way through the worst of the terrain that we faced in Botswana and elsewhere. Driving in this soft sand, if you felt yourself getting bogged down, all you needed to do was stop, back up a little, change down into the lower gears, and it would claw its way through this stuff. It was just an amazing vehicle and fun vehicle. I'll get to that in a sec. So, oops. And in fact, one more Botswana, we were driving down one of these sandy tracks and we ran into another couple who had rented a Toyota Hilux in Namibia and driven it into Botswana. And they were completely stuck and had been for several days of spinning their wheels to try and get moving again. And they were dug in up to the chassis. And I used the winch on the front of the Land Cruiser as a tow strap and wrapped it around their front axle, towed them out with the Land Cruiser so they could get going again. This was a phenomenally capable vehicle. So other equipment that you need then to enjoy one of these trips. So somebody already noticed, these come with rooftop tents as a standard issue. And at this point, this is the first photo with my travel companion in it. So I should introduce you to her. This is my beautiful, wonderful wife, Erica. She is just the absolute best travel companion. She is always like a willing participant in every crazy, harebrained adventure I'm willing to come up with. And she greets every challenge, well, most challenges with this glorious smile. And I'm just really the luckiest man alive. She makes these trips so much more fun. Other equipment that comes with the truck. So everything you need basically to survive and be comfortable out in the bush for weeks at a time. A gas stove to cook with, cooking utensils, dining utensils. There's a fridge, okay, that's hooked up to a separate battery. So it stays cold during the night, even when the vehicle's engine isn't running. And I don't know what it says about us that we sort of mostly stock our fridge with South African wine, but and it's really affordable in South Africa. So, you know, it just seems rude not to, really. And there's this one particular brand that I really got quite fond of, and I don't know what it is about it. I can't really quite put my finger on it, but it just seemed appropriate for sort of many of the situations that we found ourselves in on a daily basis. This was great. We drank quite a bit of this. Other equipment that you need: spare tires, actually full-size spare wheels, not the donut nonsense that we put up with in the US, because the terrain is harsh and flat tires happen. As you can see, I've put the spare on here because the original tire had developed a slow leak. The flats are just a part of life. There's an onboard compressor, so you can adjust tire pressures appropriate for the driving conditions. This sort of makes sense in Namibia, where you may possibly be moving back and forth between paved and unpaved places, but say in Botswana, you're just going to drop the tire pressure to 15, 20 psi and just not think about it for the rest of the trip. And then the other thing, so do not leave town without a satellite phone. For hundreds of miles across northern Botswana, there is absolutely no cell phone service at all. If you do get into trouble, if you do need assistance, this is going to be the only way of reaching the. So this may seem like a lot of work. I suppose it is, right? But for me, the upside is just phenomenal. It allows you to reach just incredibly beautiful remote places. So this is one of the favorite places that we camped in northern Botswana along this waterway. This was between Mango and Chobe, somewhere just in the middle of nowhere. It's just astonishingly beautiful. And at some point during the afternoon, we set up camp, and I just happened to look out of the tent, and this is the view. All right. I mean, you can't. It's just amazing. And it's such a privilege to be there and to be just in the middle of all this. And then, no, I don't think so. And the other thing that is just incredible are the night skies as well. There's nobody out here, and there's very little electricity. There's no light pollution. Absolutely, and it kind of reminds you of what we really don't have in this area. Just skies like this. And then just to be able to be, driving along through the bush and then all of a sudden just be surrounded by a bit of elephants is just, and other wildlife as well, is just a really magical experience and a real privilege. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that we only camp on these trips. So my wife is very tolerant. She puts up with a lot. She does enjoy a little bit of comfort every now and then. So we tend to break up the camping with stays in lodges, every few days to have a little bit of comfort. And there are some absolutely fantastic places to stay if you don't want to camp. This is a tree house on the Kubango River in Namibia. So that's Angola on the other side there. And look at the inside. The place was absolutely luxurious, bad for a treehouse, right? And you'll notice the bed net over the bed. And so you will absolutely need malaria prophylaxis to visit these areas safely. And you do want to take acute malaria in non-immune travelers such as us traveling to so that's a life-threatening medical emergency. You do not want your trip to end with being medevaced out, okay? It's another amazing place, beautiful little chalet that we stayed in the Maremi Game Reserve. It was absolutely beautiful, but the drive to get to it was just horrendous. It took hours, even in a very capable four-wheel drive vehicle. And then, when you get to, your new hotel room with your partner, there's like that brief conversation all the time. So, which side of the bed would you like? Do you want to be, close to the window, or would you rather be next to the bathroom? Well, there was no discussion when we got into this room. This was my side of the bed. Okay. And sort of what was more disturbing was not so much the side, the rapidity with which it moved when I tried to catch it to take it outside. It was just disappeared. And of course, what it did was it went right behind the headboard, which was not a popular move. Again, until the next morning when it resurfaced in the bathroom, and completely, I think it's this species, which is completely harmless, just big. Okay, now if you're looking for a vacation where you can do a lot of hiking, right? This is not it. So just behind this marker, it says stay in your car. This little scene was playing out, a lioness with her cubs. So you're in this environment with our large and potentially dangerous animals. And of course, carnivores, apex predators, predators out there as well. It's beautiful leopard. Feels safer sleeping in the rooftop tent, but I need to remind you, the cats, they're perfectly capable of climbing. Leopards spend a lot of time in trees. I've seen lions up in trees as well. In fact, there was a very scary story from earlier this year about a South African couple who were camping in Botswana and were attacked in their rooftop tent in the middle of the night by very odd circumstances. It doesn't happen at all commonly. It's just a sort of freak event. Dangerous animals. But in fact, it's actually the other animals that are probably more dangerous than the carnivores. So African buffalo are extremely dangerous. You do want to keep a safe distance from these animals. They will, without warning, people get hurt by African buffaloes every year. And then biggest, probably most dangerous animal. And so I was a little concerned when this big bull elephant walked into the, basically came over, checked us out, and stood in the middle of the road and stared us down for what seemed like an eternity. I think he was really just curious. This is actually in Osha National Park, but for a few minutes, I think he was satisfied and he wandered on his way. What's more of a problem is actually females with young elephants, with their young. Female elephants live in matriarchal herds, sometimes 30, 40, 50 animals with their young. As you can imagine, they're highly protective. There's been at least 3 incidences this know of where American tourists have been trampled to death in South Africa by elephants. On each of those occasions, they got out of their vehicle and approached the elephants on foot to try to take better photos. And it's absolutely tragic, right? The people died as a result of being excited about seeing elephants. That's heartbreaking. Then at the same time, these are powerful, intelligent animals. We've given them no reason to like us or to trust us. And you really can't blame this female for, turning into 4 tons of homicidal fury if she thinks that you're threatening her or her offspring. There are dangers around water. Okay, Nile crocodiles are very common. Unlike alligators in the US, these are quite dangerous. Farmers lose livestock, crocodiles all the time, and they're certainly bigger than you are. So you just don't go near. Be careful walking in the water because there's crocodiles as well. And then the other danger associated with water, hippos. Hippos are very dangerous animals. During the day, they stay in the water. These 2 actually were in that waterway, that campsite I showed you a couple minutes ago. During the day, they were quite happy in here. I think this is a mother and calf. At night, hippos come out to feed. And so I made this short movie using a thermal imaging device, sitting in the tent. It was pitch black outside. We couldn't see them. But we could hear there's like this rhythmic as they're like munching on the vegetation, and you could see them with the thermal imager. They're basically right there in the camp. So you need to stay in your tent at night. Other things that are active at night. This waterhole in northern Botswana was an extremely desolate place. There was nothing moving here during the day, but at night, big herd of elephants arrived to drink. And then other animals are active at night too. So basically the best advice to get a fire going, have a glass of Oshatufi or whatever, enjoy the stars, and then, probably an early night. Okay, don't go wandering around in the bush. Okay, so what do I have next? Okay, so that covers logistics of of these kinds of trips, what I wanted to do the rest of my time is basically take you through a sample of the birds that you can expect to see on these trips, and a little bit of some of the other wildlife, but it's mostly Montgomery Bird Club. So I didn't put in too many pictures of elephants. But are there any questions about logistics before I move on with the birds, Clive? Yeah, some treks actually have a tank that you can fill with water. So a question for the folks online was, where do you carry all the water? And that's a really great question. And yeah, you basically, I mean, you have to carry water with you because there aren't really any places to stock up. So yes, lots of carboys full of water and so on. Yeah, no question. Go ahead. Question was, did we carry a firearm? No, we did not. No. So what I'll do with my remaining time is basically show you a sample of the birds that you can expect to see. And what I plan to do is sort of start along the coast, some incredible birding here, and then progress eastwards via Etosha National Park, and then onwards into the Okavango and the Chobe, and I'm eventually ending up in a little bit of Zambia at the end. So starting along the coast, so the Namibian coastline is just spectacular. There's these towering dunes, basically right up to the Atlantic Ocean, and but right on the shoreline there are wetlands that have incredible bird life. These massive flocks of flamingos of two species. These are mostly lesser flamingos. All these pillar guys back are greater flamingos, and here's a confused about which flock he should be with. And here's one of each side by side, really, you know, anything alike. Vast flocks of and a huge diversity of other shorebirds. I love shorebirds, and this was some of the most enjoyable shorebirding I've experienced in terms of diversity. Just this one photo, we have a ruff feeding with two curly sandpipers and at least a little stint. You know, birds cause palpitations when they show up in the, so they're like flocks of these things everywhere. This is a fantastic place to see some of Africa's special plovers. So these first two, Kitlitz's plover and three-backed plover, these are quite widely distributed throughout, including into a little bit of the north. Find them here in good numbers. And these second two are more restricted in terms of their distribution in East and Southern Africa, and can be quite local and difficult to find. So white-fronted plover and chestnut plover is actually beautiful and across the. And then there are several endemic species that are endemic to South here. So there's a very handsome species of oyster cat, African oyster cat, only found in southwestern Africa. There's a locally endemic species of gull, Hartlob's gull. Some of the adults have this beautiful shadowy hood that makes them look a bit like a gray hooded gull, but they have a dark eye and a dark bill. Gray hooded gull for reference, with a pale eye and a much redder colored bill. And then there are three locally endemic species of cormorants. One, the most abundant is Cape cormorant, and they can be large flocks of these. And it's worth sorting through them because there are two other species. This is kind of the spooky looking bank cormorant, which is quite a chunky cormorant, all dark with and variable amounts of white on the back. This is quite scarce and hard to find. And then crowned cormorant, it belongs to the genus of pygmy cormorants, a small little cormorant with a stubby little bill. And unfortunately, most of these are, you know, very range restricted, unfortunately endangered. There's a locally endemic species of tern called Damara tern that's a small tern. It belongs to the same genus, our least tern, but it has an all dark bill, and we get to see of these birds. I'm really excited to see. We even managed to get ashore for half a day, and I kind of hesitate to call this a pelagic because so went a few miles offshore. We didn't really get that far out, and as you can see, the weather conditions were not ideal. It was quite foggy, but we did get far enough out to see some, including white-chinned petrel, which is a common bird of the Southern Ocean. And it turned out this was also a great way to see Cape gannet, which again is range restricted, endemic to South Africa. And then probably best of all was African penguin. We found one African penguin, which again endemic to Southwest Africa and really at the northern end of its range in central Namibia. And then the trip was quite eventful for other reasons as well. I expected to see large mammals in Africa, but humpback on my list. And one point during the trip, we were actually boarded by a rather aggressive male Cape fur seal that refused to disembark until we gave him the chum bucket. And once he'd finished with that, he finally left us. We had other visitors, a great white corn that landed on board as we were getting close to shore. And the crew were just fantastic. The captain was a real character. He's kind of, get off my boat. And then best of all, don't get on pelagic trips in the US. We were served freshly shucked oyster champagne on the way back. I mean, this really elevated the whole experience. And I really think we should start doing this. I'll suggest this to Brian Patterson the next time on one of his trips. I'll probably get myself thrown overboard. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. So that's the coast, and then we'll move to Etosha. So Etosha is a stunning, beautiful place. The landscape is dominated by this enormous pan, which only rarely really has water in it. Not even every year. It's only occasionally that there's sufficient rain for water to accumulate in the pan. Only ever about 10 centimeters deep and hypersaline because it's an endorheic lake. There's no outflow. Water flows in and then just evaporates. So all this salt accumulates. And we've not seen it when there's water in it, but it must be a spectacular sight because thousands of flamingos and pelicans flock there to nest, and the water is full of brine shrimp. But even when there's no water, there's just a tremendous amount of life here, all manner of large game, herds, all manner of everything from majestic bark, these tiny fragile legs and little cute. And this is one of the few places where you can still see wild black rhinoceros. Only 2,000 or 3,000 of these left in the wild now, I think. Just tragic. But the birds are amazing. This is one of the best places I've been to see ostrich. And, these are enormous, right? And the terrain is so flat that in any one place, you just do like a 60-degree scan, you probably see a couple dozen ostrich. You can pick them out. It's so flat. There are other birds of open country here. This is a Cory bustard, which is, I think, the world's heaviest flying bird. Males can be over 40 pounds in weight. And generally you see these sort of just striding through the bush, very, very stately. There are other bustards. This is a particularly dramatic looking one, white-quilled bustard. It's fantastic plumage. There are other bustards, lots of bustards. This is bustard, basically. Red-crested bustard, another very attractive looking bird. Other birds of open country. They're shorebirds adapted to this incredibly dry environment. They're very cryptically patterned, quite easy to find just because they're by them. And then a lap This is crowned lapwing. So in the same genus as northern lapwing and southern lapwing, but here it is in this, basically, it's a desert, these beautiful legs and this cute little white halo around the top of the head. Also tremendous diversity of hornbill here. This is a locally endemic species, a red-billed hornbill. It's very similar to the more widespread southern red-billed hornbill. In fact, the two may sort of interbreed a little bit where their ranges meet. And I've seen some birds that show mixed characteristics, suggesting that they might be high. And then southern yellow-billed hornbill is a more robust hornbill with a bigger bill that's yellow. Species. This is African gray hornbill, actually quite widely distributed in Africa south of the Sahara. And another local species, Bradford's hornbill, has a big orange bill and a yellow eye. The larks. The larks. There's the lark, Tosha area. Many of them are like confusingly similar, and that's fun if you enjoy that kind of stuff. I do. This is probably the most distinctive species, a gray-backed sparrowlark, and it has this honking bill. It's a very distinctive species, unlike the other larks. And then there's some special birds of the African bush that I really enjoy. This is one of my favorites. Crombecs belong to an Africa-specific family, Macrosphenidae, and crombecs, it actually, basically they have no tail. The tail is so vanishingly small that you just it, and they attaches. And then this is breasted gonolek. This belongs to another family that's endemic to Africa, not found outside of Africa. It's a bush shrike, a member of the Malacanotidae. Just a gorgeous bird. This is also a fantastic place to see martial eagle, which is a big, that is quite scarce and difficult to find in other parts of Africa, but they occur at relatively high density in Etosha. Mostly see them soaring up but you can occasionally encounter them at close range. I think this bird had just eaten crop because but they doesn't really look like that. That's probably why we were able to get close to it. It was just too full to fly. And okay. So the other feature about Etosha is that, so there's very little water. There are water holes that attract all manner of wildlife. So all sorts of animals come to drink. Zebra, for example. Among the birds, there can be huge flocks of sandgulls that come to the water holes in order to drink, especially in the early morning. This is one species, Burchell's sandgrouse, being photobombed by a little stint on the side there. So another Burchell's in flight. So they literally come in droves, sometimes flocks of dozens at a time. And there are other species of sandgrouse too. This is Namakwa sandgrouse, these beautiful little blue spots across the scapulas there. And double-banded sandgrouse with this cute little nose band. And then wherever there's large animals, there are these birds. Again, an Africa-specific family. It just has two members, the oxpeckers. This is one of them, yellow oxpecker, has a red and yellow and a red eye, like a palish rump. It's on the back of a giraffe. This giraffe happened to have both species on it. And this is the red-billed oxpecker riding high up here between the ossicones of this giraffe. Giddy up, right? And inside here you can see, so it has a completely red bill and a yellow ring around the eye. So it's just subtle differences, slightly smaller as well. And then the other iconic species of African savannas, of course, is lilac-breasted roller. I mean, ridiculously beautiful bird. And I think they're best appreciated in flight. And they're actually incredibly territorial. They will defend their territory just against all comers, including birds of other species. So this one's giving this yellow-billed oxpecker here a real time. although just the audacity to fly through its airspace. But honestly, the oxpecker didn't look all that bothered. So as you progress eastward, the environment, there's gradually more and more water, and that allows for trees to grow. And so you start to see these enormous African baobab trees. There's Erica standing in there just to give you a sense of scale. No idea how old this centuries, because very quickly. There are also patches now of Miombo woodland, which host other species. So there's sort of different birds as you move eastwards. And this is one of my favorites. This is another bush shrike, another member of the Malacanotidae, Gabon boo-boo. And it's kind of sort of, well, it's just black and white, right? I mean, it's cool looking. But the best thing about this species is the vocalizations. It's absolutely fantastic. So males and females duet. I'm not sure you can really call it that, because they actually vocalize simultaneously. The male makes this delicate sort of bell-like whistle, and then at the same time, the female makes this simultaneous sort of sound over the top of the male. And I'm clearly not doing justice to it, but it's just an incredible sound. And when you first hear it, you're like, how on earth is a bird making that sound with these two completely different sounds that occur simultaneously coming from the same bush? And then when you figure out where the source, you see it's actually two birds next to each other making this sound. I have no idea about that. Another species of bush shrike, the sulfur-breasted bush shrike, has this yellow and gray and orange plumage. Sunbirds, these I think of as sort of old world equivalent of our hummingbirds, right? Like metallic iridescent plumage. They feed on nectar, so they're constantly like amped up on nectar, and generally don't sit still for photographs except very, very occasionally. And there are lots of different birds. These are just two of them. And then this freaky looking thing is freaking green pigeon. Yes, there are green pigeons in other parts of the world, and it looks like something out of sorry, this like blue eye, just spooky looking bird. And then this is a white-browed robin chat, actually very common even in people's gardens. You often see these around lodges where there's a little bit of lawn that's being irrigated. And a member of the Crucifer genus, this is far greater diversity in this genus further north, and you get into the closer equator in Africa. This is really the only species that's widespread in southern Africa, a very attractive. Other little birds that you wouldn't notice if you're not looking for them carefully. Up in the tree, this is a yellow Apalis, a member of the Cisticola family, which are generally mostly small and boring looking birds, but some of them are actually quite colorful. And then barbets, the old world barbets. This is barbet. And this is crested barbet. Again, fairly common in these sparse woodlands. And then there are amazing starlings. They're, if only our starlings, diversity of starlings that they have in Africa, we probably think differently about them. And of course, if they weren't, alien as well. There's some really beautiful starlings in Africa. I spent a couple of minutes talking about owls. So a lot of these woodland birds are quite skulky and difficult to find. They become much easier to find when there's an owl around. And this is pearl spotted owlet. It's essentially a pygmy owl. It's the same genus as our North American pygmy owls. They're active during the day, and if they start calling, it will attract a mob of smaller birds that come in to mob them. So while we're on owls, there's really fantastic owls. That pearl-spotted owlet is one of the smallest. This is the biggest owl in Africa. This is Vero's eagle owl. It's enormous, bigger than our great horned owl. You'll find them roosting. They have dark eyes that are sort of set off these cheap lit. It's really good looking. So you can sometimes see them during the day, but they are active at night. And most of the other owls as well are active at night. And actually, the great thing about camping out in the bush is that you're out there, where the owls are, you might, if you're lucky, see some of them if they come to your camp. Not advisable to go off tromping into the bush looking for them. Wait for them to come to you. So this is African scops owl. Actually tempted, and it's a small owl, kind of like a screech owl. A much bigger owl. It says our barred owl. Again, visiting our campsite. And there are other birds out there as well. At some campsites, it's possible to hear 3 different species of nightjar all calling simultaneously. This was the only one that I had success luring into the campsite to get a photo of fiery-necked nightjar. And then this is probably one of my favorite owls. We heard southern white-faced owl calling at many of the campsites that many of the places that we camp in the bush, often, late in the night. I think, oh, do I get up and try and see it? Well, finally, the one place in where we stayed, I heard one calling before it was dark. And after a few minutes, I was able to locate it and get a few photos. And this really is a very endearing. And I have to say this, on our last trip to Botswana, this was probably the bird of the trip for me, because this is a highly sought after species in Africa, Pell's fishing owl. It's widely distributed in Africa, south of the Sahara. Nowhere is it common, scarce and hard to find. It has very sort of specific habitat requirements. It feeds on fish, so it requires tall, mature woodland close adjacent water. And just I've looked for this in the past and failed. I'm excited to, which we saw a pair of these roosting during the day in a stand of tree close to a waterway. It was the highlight for me of that trip. Other raptors, this is a fairly common species in the bush. Gabar goshawk. It's a small hawk with short wings and a long tail that hunts other birds, kind of like our accipiters. The cool thing about this is that most adults look at this with this beautiful barring underneath, but there's a rare black morph that is genetically determined. There's a recessive gene apparently that that causes this plumage pattern of the bird's completely black except for the barring in the flight feathers. Really beautiful, but the only I've seen of that species. Other raptors, of course, they're one thing that Africa is known for are the vultures. There's vultures, a good half dozen species or more. This is the biggest, almost looks like a Disney vulture, right? With that enormous hatchet-shaped bill. This is a lappet-faced vulture. And then this is one of the smallest, has a very slender bill that that distinguishes it from all the other vultures. A very obvious field mark, even at quite a distant. Hooded vulture. And unfortunately, the vultures now are also endangered. It's a very distinctive raptor of African battler. It's sort of an eagle-like raptor, maybe related to the old snake eagles. Adults have this fantastic black and white plumage, weird shaped wings with bulging secondaries and thin, and they have really no tail. And they soar in a dihedral like turkey vultures, and they even totter back and forth as they glide. And then the savannas of southern Africa, excellent place to see falcon, really big, powerful falcon in the same clade of falcons as geofalcon. Everything scatters when these things take the air. And then, so probably Africa's most iconic bird of prey, African fish eagle. This is actually the national bird of 4 different African countries, including 3 of the ones that we have visited on these trips: Namibia, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. It's the other. And they really are dramatic, imposing looking birds, especially relatively common. They feed on fish where there's water. So speaking of water, so now moving into the Okavango and the river systems of northern Botswana, really one of the best ways to explore these habitats is on the water. And it's relatively to find outstanding knowledge of the local birds and where to find them. Often excited to share their knowledge with you. And the great thing about traveling to these areas independently is that you can work directly with these people, pay them directly, so that the money that goes straight into their pockets. So birds you can see in these marshy habitats. Jacana is a very common species in marshes throughout Africa, but there's a much harder species to find on the hit list of visiting birders. Jacana, which is a really tiny, cute little jacana. We've had good success with that, and then this was. I was really excited to see this actually on our last trip. A painted snipe in a swamp in Botswana. Painted snipe are like phalaropes. The females are the more colorful of the 2 sexes. The males are much more cryptically patterned. And then yellow-billed storks are often a common sight. You see them nesting along some of the rivers, particularly on the family portrait of yellow-billed storks here, and is delivering fresh nesting material, which you can see is quite a hazardous undertaking. And the stork, really fascinating stork you find in these habitats, is the African openbill. It's really kind of bizarre. It has this oily, greasy edge, and then this odd mandible in the maxilla, even when the bill is completely closed. And the reason for that is that this is a mollusk specialist, kind of like limpkins, right? It feeds primarily on mollusks, and that gap allows it to grab the slippery shells of mollusks like this. There are some extraordinary herons. This is the world's biggest heron, the Goliath heron. These are 4.5 feet tall, just really impressive with an enormous bill. Some other cool herons. This is actually a also highly sought after species that's really found on marshes in Zambia, northern Botswana, and a little bit of Namibia. Encountered one flying down the river that was quite skittish. We were actually able to get close to it, and it a rufous throat. That's reflected in the scientific name of the species. And this bird, again, high on the hit list of birds visiting. This is a very difficult bird to find and a very difficult bird to see well. This actually wasn't the first time I had seen this species, white-backed night heron. It is strictly nocturnal, as you can imagine, with these enormous eyes, and it is very difficult to find during the day. And I'd seen this species before in Uganda, and it was an experience. It was deep in the bush, and it went deeper into the bush as it's coming. And I sort of saw most of it, but only bits at a time. And so it was fantastic to get, nice views of whiteback. Another sort of sought after species is very specific, only in the middle of the larger rivers. This is rock pratimcol. Really attractive looking, and then one of my favorite birds in this environment is African. Like black skimmer, this is a special. It's kind of like in skimmer. It's only found on rivers, and it has full sort of candy corn bill that lighting. They nest on islands in the rivers, and the wet season when water levels disappear and can be very hard. So their occurrence is kind of seasonal. Colonies do get visited by crocodiles, which produce nests. So you can see there's a big Nile crocodile there in the background, but they do they feed just like our skimmers do. And then this again was favorite birds from our last trip. Again, a species that I tried to see before, and also a very scarce species in sub-Saharan Africa. The tiny pygmy goose, just such an adorable little goose. It's about the size of a green-winged teal, a goose the size of a green-winged. And they were quite flighty to begin with. Again, I think they're hunted for food, but we're very quite close. And the male is just a gorgeous little bird with this comically little orange bill. Diversity of kingfishers along these waterways is, this is malachite kingfisher. It actually ate that whole fish a few seconds later. This is a medium-sized kingfisher, pied kingfisher. And then this is as big as kingfishers get, basically. This is kingfisher. It's in the same genus as belted kingfisher, as our belted kingfisher, 2 to 3 times the mass. It's an enormous kingfisher. Only the laughing kookaburra is a kingfisher family. And then also along the riverways, you will see bee eaters. Is sort of an iconic species, southern carmine bee eater, incredibly colorful. The reason you find them along the riverways is because they nest in colonies in the riverbank. The huge colony of southern carmine bee eaters nesting along this. And I thought that was another. Oh, and white-fronted bee also nest by digging burrows in riverbanks. White-fronted bee eaters form small colonies, and little bee eaters, they form colonies that all actually build their nests in association with colonies of other bee eaters. So this little bee eater was nesting to this small colony of white-fronted bee eaters. You can see it in the process of activating its nesting burrow. Almost done here, folks. So I will say this didn't show much photos of the wildlife, but northern Botswana and the far eastern panhandle of Namibia, some critically endangered species. This pack from the bank, and you know, they're those Mickey Mouse ears just kind of always crack me up. So then, last of all, then so about 40 miles. So the Chobe River eventually flows into the Zambezi River, close to the Kazangula border crossing, which is this 30-meter strip of land where Botswana and Zambia meet, and in Zimbabwe on the other side. It's just really weird. I don't know who came up with these borders, but it's an odd arrangement. 40 miles downstream of there, the Zambezi plunges over a narrow gorge to form the world's biggest waterfall that the world knows as Victoria Falls. And it's always kind of bothered me a bit. You know, people have lived here for thousands of years, and then this British guy shows up and says, "Oh, we're not going to call this Victoria Falls." So I actually prefer the local name for this, which is mostly Oatunya, which roughly translated means the mist that thunders, and that is a very accurate description of what happens here. We were here in the dry season when the flow is at its lowest, and it's still just immense, overwhelming volume of water cascading. Spray is just crazy. We were drenched to the skin within you know, a matter of minutes. But all of this spray allows for the growth vegetation in the gorge, this essentially rainforest, right? There's moisture, and so there's this unique habitat here that some birds take advantage of, and you can hike down there to look for them. It's a bit of an arduous hike to get down there, more arduous to get back out, but there are some cool birds down there. And perhaps I was excited to see was trumpeter hornbill. It's crazy looking hornbill. This looks like a sock bit of some kind with this crazy casque on top of the bit. And this bird, which this turned out to be really difficult to find. We had almost given up and we were about to hike. The Taracos, Africa specific family, and canopies of these trees down in the gorge. There's actually spectacular birds, green and blue, and with these crazy crests with these long feathers tipped in white. So it felt like quite a triumph to at least. And that is the last slide. I'm sorry that was a lot, wasn't it? I'm sorry. Probably overdid it, but thank you. Well, you're very kind. Very appropriate to just end with a sunset. These are African spoonbills. So I didn't really show you any photos of, but here are some on a rookery in the top of a tree on the Chobe. For being, you enjoyed it.